Primero en inglés y después en español. It's kind of amazing to me to think that we have been doing this, the Catholic community, for over 2,000 years. And it's even more startling to think of the Jews who are still doing Passovers. In fact, the date of Easter for us as Catholics is connected to the Passover. And so that's why it changes every year, depending on when the Passover is, and that has to do with the moon or whatever, I'm not sure. But the Jews have been doing it for about 3,500 years. That first reading that we heard that was really explicit, this is what you'll do every year to remember what I'm going to do for you tonight, said God. And that was the night that the angel of death was sent out by God to kill the firstborn male of every person and every animal in Egypt. And the only ones who escaped were the houses that ate a lamb or a goat that night, killed it, took the blood, and sprinkled it on the doorposts. And when the angel of death came over and said, it was very literal, like in this sense, the angel saw the blood on the doorpost, passed over it, and then went and killed the firstborn male of every animal and every person that did not have that blood on the doorpost. And that was how the Jews escaped that night. So that every year they had this ceremonial dinner, the Passover, that gathered all of these events. And there's all kinds of details in it, not worth going through, but are part of that Passover meal. So then, as the second reading tells us, we get the Christian component of that when we have our celebration of the first Eucharist on this night, Holy Thursday, the night before Jesus died on Good Friday. And the same kind of detail. Jesus took bread, he took wine, this is my body, eat it, this is my blood, drink it. And said, do this in memory of me. And so literally, 2,000 years later, we're still doing not just Holy Thursday this night, but every time we gather for Eucharist, we're doing this in memory of Jesus and his words. And I find that powerful. I'm not quite sure that people appreciate the simple gesture of remembering some words and actions that Jesus said on one night, a couple of hours, and we're still doing it 2,000 years later. But there's something more tonight. And I have to admit, for some reason, my mind went to the chronological piece of this. The scriptures are not very clear. I know in the movie like the Ten Commandments, well, not that one because that doesn't get into the Eucharistic part, but whenever we portray or read the scriptures and read about the Last Supper and then Jesus' arrest and condemnation and the trial and the buffeting and the carrying of the cross, that's an awful lot of stuff to happen in those few hours. And the night in the garden, or after the time in the garden when he finally gets arrested and goes back and forth, and he says, "Why are you sleeping? Can you not stay awake 1 hour with me?" And it's kind of hard for me to imagine how all of that happened in such a concise amount of time, but it doesn't matter. So Jesus, before he is arrested, he has his Last Supper, and he knows exactly where all of this is going. Now, for me, the other beauty of us 2,000 years later is, if I could put it like this, here's the gospel I just read. If we could step back and realize the action in that story was going on, but they didn't really have a clue what was going on. So when Jesus, only in John's gospel, but Jesus says that he was going to give them an example. He was going to wash their feet. That's what a servant did. That's what the servants of the household did. And he was the master, the teacher. He even said, "You call me master and teacher," and it's right. That's who I am. but I'm giving you an example, and you should do what I'm going to do. And then he washed their feet. So Peter speaks up, as he always did. He was the bold one. No, you'll never wash my feet. And he says, well, if I don't wash your feet, you're not a part of my inheritance. Okay, then wash my hands and head too. But Peter didn't get it. And we get this unique look as followers of Jesus and people who have walked this journey for 2,000 years. We get to look at them confused, and we understand. And what Jesus is saying, we know exactly what he's saying and what he means, but they're not getting it. And little did they know that tomorrow he would be crucified. Little did they know, but we know it. But we also know what will follow. It's covered up right now, but we'll see that cloth taken off for Easter, and we'll see the risen Lord. We know all that, but they didn't. But having said that, this is an incredible passage. What I think may be why this only appears in John is because John's gospel was written in about the year 110, more or less, the last one. And that's 40 more years since the first gospels were written. And that means that the Christian communities had been functioning for many years, and service must have been a very important part of it, or John was trying to encourage or re-encourage the Christian community to be true servants in the style of Jesus. But in any case, in this extraordinary gospel, Jesus says, do what I am doing, what I'm about to do. He removes his outer garment, he washes their feet, and gives them the example of service. And that, in John's gospel, is tied to the first Eucharist, which makes it even more significant that at this Last Supper, this meal that Jesus would say, commemorate this always in my name, that he would tie to it service. Today, we're really called to be followers of Jesus Christ. And we're really called to be foot washers. You know, when the pandemic hit, we got a group of volunteers. They're here all the time like ants. They're running around doing everything in here. During the pandemic, they would take the altar, set it up, take it down, set it up, take it down, every single day. And they invigorated the church when it was the worst time of our lives, certainly of my lifetime. And we just called them the volunteers until they came up with the name and said, we want to be called the foot washers. And I thought that was very nice that they would connect it with this, because foot washing is our call, that we would love one another and serve one another in the style of Jesus, in the style of Jesus. Now tonight, in addition to that, other stuff is given to us. For example, we will take the Eucharist tonight, empty the tabernacle. The doors will be left open tonight, and they'll be left open tomorrow with nothing in there, empty, symbolizing Jesus gone in the tomb. And we anticipate it. We take the Eucharist across the street for adoration until midnight. Then we put him away in another sacred place. And the tabernacle will be empty all day tomorrow. So when people come into the empty church, because the altar will be stripped, they'll find just the stuff you can't move, the altar and the amble and the other podium there. Everything else will be removed. And I suspect that many a Catholic will come in and see the tabernacle doors open, or at least some Catholics, and say, oh my God, they stole Jesus. But the tabernacle is empty to signify the passion, the death, and the entombment of Jesus. So all of this stuff is supposed to spiritually activate us, spiritually touch us in a way that makes us long for Jesus and long to be like Jesus and long to follow Jesus. And that is what we celebrate in a very climactic way on this Feast of Holy Thursday, tomorrow on Good Friday, and the Easter Vigil and Easter Sunday. Tenemos en estos eventos de esta noche, mañana y el día siguiente, es de 3 días muy sagrado. Estamos celebrando esta última cena y entiende que estamos celebrando eso por más que 2000 años. Imagina eso. Jesús en esta noche dijo, lo hace eso en memoria de mí, tomando este pan y vino. Y estamos haciéndolo por 2000 años, pero los judíos en la primera lectura estaban celebrando la Pascua por 3500 años. Y continúa esta noche o este tiempo, el tiempo de la Pascua. Increíble que algunas palabras y acciones de Dios o de Jesús pueden tener un impacto en nosotros que existe y es la práctica de nosotros por 2000 años. Lo estamos haciendo, pero en esta noche también, en esta última cena, en este Evangelio de San Juan, Jesús hizo una otra cosa. Él dijo que voy a lavar los pies de ustedes. Y San Pedro dijo, no puede. Y él dijo, sí, yo tengo que hacerlo o tú no puedes estar un parte de mí. Entonces, él lavó los pies porque él estaba conectando con esta escena, esta realidad. Yo quiero que ustedes puedan ser servidores siempre. Y esta es la invitación, el impacto de esta noche. La otra cosa es, vamos a tener adoración después de la misa, el tabernáculo va a estar vacío, y todo tiene significado muy bonito y muy fuerte, pero esta cena es central. Y en esta cena central recibimos esta llamada de Jesús, que podemos seguirlo como servidores, sirviendo las necesidades de uno al otro y todo el mundo. Entonces, esta noche continuamos abriendo en estos simbolismos y podemos recibir espiritualmente esta llamada y esta invitación a seguir Cristo.